Good morning here in a below freezing January here in Seattle, Washington. Some of my friends yesterday reported in across the country here in the United States that it's cold. Welcome to another episode of the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast. If you're watching here on social media, do us a favor, hit the subscribe, share, like, or comment. If you comment during the show, we may give you a shout out. If you want all the episodes here from the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast, go to engagingvirtualmeetings.online and you can see over 100 episodes and a new episode every Wednesday dropping. And if you would like a ticket to our conference this year, the last week of October, October 28, 29, 30, you can go to engagingvirtualmeetings.com/CON and you can grab a free ticket or a paid ticket to this amazing, engaging retreat. All right. Meanwhile, coming up today, I have an experienced entrepreneur. She's owned three businesses. She holds a doctorate in cognitive neuroscience. She specializes in unconscious processing of emotional and behavior change. We met in Costa Rica with our good friends, the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers, and she is a past president of the Professional Speaking Association of the UK. Please welcome my guest, Dr. Lynda Shaw.
Hello, John.
Hello, Dr. Lynda. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm in the UK, about an hour out of London, and it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's not nearly as cold as Canada.
It still could be time for tea, yes or no?
Yeah, it's just above freezing at the moment, which is cold for us because we're a bit wussy when it comes to extreme weather out in the UK.
Well, you're in no wuss in Costa Rica, right, Linda?
Oh no, that was good time. We learned loads and we had fun. It was the best mix. It was
And is that
good.
your first? Was that your first trip to Costa Rica?
It was. It,
Oh, what was
yeah.
the?
How about you? Was it your first trip?
It was my second trip. I've actually did team building there in 2014. 2014.
Okay. Did you see any changes in that time?
Well, the fun part actually is that I got a chance to visit the Toucan Rescue Ranch, right? And so it was 10 years later, and this woman has been rescuing toucans and sloths for now over a decade. And so she grew a lot. And we actually got to see 14 baby sloths being fed on their rescue ranch. And they actually, if they're able to, release them back into the wild when they become big enough and grown enough. So.
Aren't they fascinating? Well, we were watching some of them, and they're just well, obviously they're slow. We all know that, but it's the way they literally are upside down, and there's a hook, on their paw or whatever you call it. Yeah, and they just very slowly. I feel I could learn from them. I need to slow down.
Well, I'll give you this. Actually, we got a chance to talk to one of the top sloth experts in the world, and he dispelled the myths that the sloths are slow. They can actually be very fast, for instance, when they're being pursued or when they're defending. But they are also, he says, one of the most purposeful animals. So, in other words, they move slow to conserve their energy for something else later. So,
Oh, that's clever. Purposeful. Okay, they're
speak-
not slow, they're purposeful. I'll write that down.
Speaking of purposeful, why don't we take a moment for my friends who don't know you yet, Dr. Linden, take a moment to share excuse me, who you are and what you do.
Okay, thank you for asking. I'm Dr. Lynda Shaw. I hold a doctorate, as John said, in behavioural neuroscience. My topic of research was unconscious processing of emotions. So consciousness is my all-time favourite subject. It is this incredibly infuriating conundrum that nobody has any answers for, which drives everybody crazy if they're wanting to study it. So I love it. I absolutely adore it. And when I've always been in business, and I've had three businesses before, the largest of which was 20 staff I had. And then I decided to take myself back to university, which is when I studied socioanthropology, psychology, and neuroscience. That took me 9 years all told to get my doctorate on that pathway, which was fantastic. And then I came out thinking, right, I can now get all my business ideas together and all my experience, and then all of the stuff I've learned in academia, and I can mash it all together and save the world. And it didn't work. at all. Because what a surprise. But that's how naive I was. I thought, this is really brilliant. I've got so much to offer businesses and commerce and so on. But the thing was that I could talk a lot about different aspects of the brain, decision making, judgments, emotions, all of those things. So people would say things like, oh, yeah, that Lynda, she talks about the brain. What does she actually do? And I went, oh. So big mistake. Okay, big mistake. So my marketing efforts were, I hit a brick wall. So then I decided to follow my heart and carry on with my research and talk to businesses about unconscious processing of emotion. And it worked out that I was hired by a couple of very big corporates, and it opened up a whole new world. And that's what I've been doing for some years. However, last year I looked at my little grandbabies. I've got tiny little people.
Oh,
And
great. Congratulations.
thank you very much. I want to eat them. I'm going to devour these little people. Okay. They are just edible. So anthropologically, I'm sure people have got something to say about me on that one. But yeah, so these gorgeous little people, and I looked at them and I thought, what's the world going to be like when you're my age? And you know what?
Right.
It actually really freaked me out. It really did. And I got very upset about it. And I sat with it and sat with it. I thought, right, what can I do, Lynda? What can you do? What can you do? And I do the recycling, I do the sustainability with clothing and all of those things that we know we should be doing. But it's not enough. So I thought and thought and thought. I thought, well, okay, if I'm doing the best I can, what is it the world needs? And I came up with the answer of genius ideas. But I'm not a genius, but I know how to communicate. And a lot of geniuses don't. So that's what I concentrate on now. I mentor geniuses to help them talk about these ideas that are bubbling around in their heads that they could go to their grave and nobody ever know about, because
Mhm.
we need to know. We desperately need this information. What's is it? Well, people walking amongst us in the streets could have these amazing ideas that nobody knows about. So that's what I'm doing. I target really. I speak to investors of the smaller companies who are in the STEM industries, and I find that when those companies get stuck, up to about 150 employees, they get stuck. And then the investors are going, excuse me, I've invested money here. What can we do about it? So the investors are likely to employ me more than anybody else. So that is what I'm doing. And that has also spilled over into speaking to larger organizations about unlocking hidden potential, because I can do that. I can extract information out of people and help them articulate it so that people are persuaded to support them and therefore manage to get funding for a project that they may not have been able to in the first place. That's what I'm doing.
Oh, well, that's all. That's you're a classic underachiever, Dr. Shaw. Now
Yeah,
let's
I
talk,
drive the family nuts. I do. I drive that.
well, let's talk a little bit about the path because what you thought the path was and what the path actually turned into was very different than what you thought. And I'm just curious, can you talk a little bit about that or I think one of the most important parts, especially for speakers, is often they find that they're speaking not what they thought about, but what they need to talk about. So I'm just curious if you had a moment inside of all that, like often I've heard stories, people either get frustrated because nobody will buy the thing that they have, and then all of a sudden they discover a niche that people naturally gravitate to. So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think my mistake at the very beginning on the speaking circuit was that I thought everybody would want to hear this amazing stuff I have. And it's wrong. It was totally wrong. People want to hear what's relevant to them. So one needs to work out, do your research. You've got to actually find out what is keeping the COO awake at night, what is keeping the CFO awake at night, and what is it that the CEOs are really scratching their head about? What is it right now that is going to give them a good night's sleep? Then going to change how they feel next day in terms of their business and their organization. So I think that is one of the keys. We have to be responsive and serve our audience, not ourselves. And as a speaker, I hear, as past president of the UK and Ireland, the PSA UK and Ireland,
Mhm.
I've heard a lot of speakers. And honestly, there is quite a percentage that haven't quite got that yet. So, we think we're going to change the world, but in actual fact, we're not. What we've got to do is serve our audience exactly what they need right now, but within our area of expertise. Because I found now that keynote speaking, I don't know if you find it there in Canada, but most certainly in the UK here, that you're asked to go be a keynote on stage, but they want interaction, which it didn't used to be like that. And that's fine by me. I love to interact with the audience and work with them. But they also want us then to be on a panel or on a workshop, as well as be a keynote at that particular conference, which is great because I'm always there all day anyway.
Right.
But it means that you have to know your topic. You can't just have this speech, this presentation, and that's it. No, no, no. You have got to really understand what you're talking about so that you can serve your clients properly.
Yes, this was the book that I brought to Canada, or actually Costa Rica, and engagement is really the key, at least for me on my side, Dr. Shaw. That's a thing that I've been studying now for over 30 years. And it's not only how we do it in person, but on hybrid and virtual too, because they're slightly different. They're similar, but there are some things that are really different. And I think that the science of engagement, there's some art and there's some science, right? Sometimes there's some science. There's some certain brain things that we now know about how we work that will engage the audience. And there are some things that are art. Like obviously the brain is so complicated that there is no way that we know everything that's happening up inside of there, and especially in the 6 billion different kind of brains, right? Technically, every brain is like a fingerprint, every very different. So you have to sometimes discover patterns or trends, things that like a good percentage of people will be engaged with, as we go along. I'm curious around that too, though. Let's go backwards to the topic. You said that many of the people in the UK haven't yet discovered their topic, and I'm the president here for our National Speakers Association chapter, and often I find it's not a problem, Dr. Shaw, of selecting the one topic. It's a problem is often too is that they selected 10,000 topics.
Yeah, yeah, totally right.
You can't
Yeah.
be an expert in 10,000. And so there is this process of honing down and saying that if I could just pick one lane to get in, then you can really be an expert in it. Really be an expert. I'd love to hear, anything you have to share from the UK.
Yeah, no, it's very true. You've got to pick your lane. You do, and then it makes marketing so much easier. And then you know who you're actually can serve most effectively. As you quite rightly say, you can then become much more of an expert in your lane. But that doesn't mean to say that your life's experiences, I'm a neuroscientist, I'm hired to talk about the brain and various things, but
Yeah.
I can bring in psychology, I can bring in social anthropology, which actually gives a depth to things. Understanding why people do what they do across cultures is really, really important. And also my business stuff and even my family. Even though you've got your little niche, you've got your lane that you want to stick with, it doesn't mean to say you have to dismiss everything else you've got going on that you can offer. You just weave it in
Yeah.
again to serve the clients if that's where it's going. Yeah, and I think people, once they've worked that out, then they are a much stronger speaker and a much stronger business person and more useful. That's another thing. I literally, if I feel I am not useful to my clients, you will find me sitting in the corner, crouched down, sucking my thumb, rocking because I can't cope. All right. I have to be useful. I have to be useful. And if I think I've not served them properly, I don't sleep for days. It's crazy. So I really bend over backwards to make sure that anything I've delivered has got a really big practical application and easy to implement on 9 o'clock next morning. But yeah, I do. Literally, useful is my Achilles heel.
Okay, where did that useful come from? I feel like this might have been maybe inspired by your parents or something, maybe an experience growing up.
Um, I'm an only child, so if I could be spoilt with anything, I was spoilt with love.
Hmm.
But the downside of that is that there is a little bit too much attention. on the one child, and that can be a problem. That can be a problem. But I was very lucky. I had a wonderful upbringing, absolutely fantastic, fantastic parents. They were always encouraged by independence, and I think only children are naturally independent. So I am one of those that, if there's anything gone wrong in the family, it's, oh, have you rung Lynda? Well, Lynda will do that. Lynda, have you asked Lynda? Lynda. And I do, I'm a doer. I do. Yeah, okay, I'll go to the airport and pick you up. Yeah, I'll go to the train station. Yep. I do. And that's the way I cope in times of problems. If there is a bereavement in the family or a friend, I have to be practical. I have to be useful. And it might be because I don't have siblings and I am very autonomous. So maybe it is something to do with my upbringing. Haven't been asked that before, John. Well done.
Well, good. Thank you so much. Hopefully, we'll be one of your top podcast interviewers in your experience. That would be great. Let's see. In the neuroscience part, I've gotten a chance to meet Dr. Carmen Simon here in the United States, and she's been doing a lot of research on virtual and hybrid and in-person brains. What is the top trend, if you don't mind, if I'm asking, what are the top trend that you see in neuroscience that's keeping CEOs up at night, but that you're sharing with them?
The biggest problem that they have told me about, because I ask them constantly, the biggest problem that they have is they are worried sick about people having a work laptop at home.
Work-life balance, like that, right?
Yeah, they're worried about it because of cybersecurity. And that is their biggest issue, as far as I have found out. And this is just anecdotal evidence from a very small research that I've done. So yeah, they're very worried because all it takes is somebody to be at home and forget they're on their work laptop and press a shopping channel or something. And the data that's in the laptop, of course, especially in the finance industry and organizations like that, is huge, and it is a big issue. In fact, my son's in cybersecurity, and yeah, it's a big problem. So I think the way we're moving will be just constantly tightening up those issues. But that seems to be the one that worries them most about virtual working.
Well, interesting. Just today, one of my CEO friends, David Nielsen, give him a shout out, said that he has been deep faked 3 times. No, no, people he knows have been deep faked by him, meaning that somebody was able to impersonate his voice and now his image on a Zoom call.
I know.
And so they have convinced some of the friends to log into something. Luckily, they knew him well enough to report it back to him and let him know you're being faked. But he said, some people said it's common. It hasn't happened to me yet, so I'm kind of happy about that. But he said that was one of the key parts there. My son is also in cybersecurity too, and now there seems to be a trend, Lynda, where the younger generation is now being distrustful of all the technology they grew up with. So, for instance, we talked about grandbabies. I became a grandfather 8 months ago, and they have not posted one photo, and they've in fact required the family to not post any photos of the child growing up.
Yeah, same in our family. I would love to show off my grandbabies, but no chance. No, it's not going on Facebook, it's not going on LinkedIn, they're not going on anything at all, any of the platforms, because the parents don't want it. And I absolutely agree. It is a worry. It is a worry, yeah.
Yeah, you have to meet me in person. I do have access to a shared secured folder, but you can only see the photos if you met me in person. So,
Excellent.
well, okay. So, what happened to you in 2020? So, March of 2020 hit. You may have had a fine speaking career on the road. And then, of course, I think the UK had a similar experience to us here in the United States. I'm curious, what happened to you in March of 2020 and how did you deal with it?
Um, like everybody, I was plummeted into shock. I had no idea what was going on. The brain doesn't do gaps, it hates gaps in information. So, like everybody, I was on the phone, I was watching the news, trying to work out what the hell all this means. And of course, once the brain is then, you're in a state of anxiety because there is gaps in information. And then you're looking at all this information and you think, my memory actually fits with the pattern that you're talking about. So I'll take that bit of information and I'll take that bit of information and I'll park that and that will become my truth. And then you discover just a couple of weeks later that it's not true at all. It's also something different. So there was a constant change, constant level of uncertainty. So I was interviewed enormously on the radio.
Mm,
Oh, gosh, daily, loads and loads of times on the radio. What are we doing with this? What are we doing with that? And it's I said, now my advice was always control what you can control so that you feel a less level of anxiety. And remember that the brain will try to control more, but if it can't, we can have ways of actually coping with the uncertainty. And that's what I was talking about. But like all speakers, like most businesses, my speaking business fell off a cliff.
yeah.
Um, However, I had in 2020 my strongest financial turnover because I already had an online program that I was running on to learn about basic neuroscience. And I immediately turned to that. And because people were at home, they had the time to go on courses.
Right.
And I was really, my online teaching was phenomenal. And I had a really, really good year. And then the second year was the same in COVID. So I was already in a position where I had online programs. So I was able to, the word pivot seemed to be used quite a lot. So the word pivot, I was pivoting rather well.
And where did you start teaching online? Did you do that like way back, like 2010, maybe even further?
The Neuroscience Professional Development Program started in, where are we now? Started in 2018.
2018. Oh, okay. So a couple years before
Yeah.
pandemic, right?
Yeah, so it was 2 years before COVID began, or before the lockdowns began. So they were already established, but not to the extent in which I pursued them. And it wasn't hard because people were just desperate to do something, It was just, you could go for your walk once a day, and it's astonishing. I found it fascinating how quickly wildlife came into our streets.
Yeah.
We had deer in the streets, in the roads. We had all sorts of animals coming. You're thinking, whoa, I didn't even know you were around this area. And they quickly came out when there were no cars on the road. I found it was like one massive, great big social experiment, wasn't it? It was devastating for many, many people, but it was a very interesting social experiment on the human nature.
Well, maybe this is a good related question then, which is like, I believe there's ways that you can train yourself and your brain to handle uncertainty, right? And in fact, you can actually get comfortable with uncertainty. It's not our default, right? Often you're right, right? The human brain doesn't like gaps, doesn't like uncertainty. But I'm curious, what might you teach your grandbabies to handle future uncertainty? Because, it's highly likely you're going to have a world or at least a localized event, all right, sometimes in their 20 years of growing up. So I'm just curious, what would you want to teach them?
I'd want to teach them techniques in handling uncertainty because evolution will not have caught up in 20 years with evolving the brain to handle it better. So we are going to have to, we're going to have to learn techniques. We won't be hardwired when you're hardwired, your brain is wired from birth. Actually, you're innate, right? We're hardwired to learn a language. Birds are hardwired to build a nest. Everything else is soft-wired, and our soft wiring depends on our DNA and our immune system and our bottom-up processing. It is also dependent on our software. Our software is dependent on our top-down processing, which is our thoughts, our beliefs, our emotions, and those sorts of things. And it's also soft-wired, and it's about our environment and our social upbringing. So that if the brain for the next generation or two are going to have more and more change. They will have, and the speed of uncertainty will be faster and faster and faster. Then we're going to need to put techniques in place for them to be less anxious or worried about it. And yeah, there are things you can do. You can because if you understand, you see, oh, okay, if you, I get a
He's on
bit
track now. Here she
excited.
goes.
If you people say, oh, the brain doesn't do change. Okay, or people don't like change. That's not quite true. It's not quite true because we are change. We are in a constant state of change. Our blood pressure changes all the time, our level of hydration, how much we have slept, how hungry we are, homeostasis. All we are bubbling cauldron of change. Neurons are developing, neural pathways are developing, they're atrophying, la la la. Change, 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 change. If you if you think about it, we constantly blame outside of ourselves. So the brain doesn't like change, so therefore I don't like change. So I know what the brain does. It's trying to conserve energy, so it will go to neural pathways that are well myelinated. So that's efficient and effective, and that's what it tries to be all of the time. So what we can do is to actually embrace certain changes and our behaviour, because our behaviour changes our brain and our brain changes our behaviour. That's the feedback loop that we get all the time. So if we change our behaviour slightly, we start to rewire our brain accordingly.
Mhm.
And the more we actually use those new neural pathways, the more myelinated they become, and they will be the chosen pathways that the brain will go to for certain whatever it has been trained to do. So therefore, we can actually deliberately change our behavior to change the way our brain is wired. We can do that to a certain extent, just to a certain extent. In terms of uncertainty, when we understand that actually it's not change, it's the problem, the uncertainty is weakened. It is not so, it's not such a big thing because actually, no, okay, no, change is all right. Change is good. It's great. We can learn. We constantly learn. Anybody can learn. Doesn't matter how old we are. We may learn slower as we get older, but we can learn. No doubt, as long as we've got a healthy brain. And so the uncertainty, we can sit with it because all of a sudden we are building into our way of living
Mhm.
to handle change more, which means we are learning. And therefore, the uncertainty becomes rather attractive because we're learning something new. So we can do lots of things like that to make sure that we and the next generations will handle the levels of uncertainty they're all going to face.
Wow. Uh, so much I think about. I think the one key that I got in there is that I think one is that I mean you have to work to be comfortable with uncertainty. And I love that you say you have to sit with uncertainty often because our first reaction is to react. And
Yeah.
but the trained reaction is to actually take a moment, right? This is why a lot of people like mindfulness training or just says you should sit with it for a little while before you decide what to do, and often you'll make a better decision. But I'll go back to the part we were talking about being efficient, right? This is a little bit back to the sloth that I was telling you back at the beginning. You might love this story. So, Dr. Lynda, I got a chance to be a mountain climber for a while. I've summited Mount Rainier 5 times and Denali in Alaska once. And one of the times I was interviewing the mountain climber, and I said, "So, how do you get up and down the mountain so easily?" And he looked at me and he just goes, "Well, we're lazy." And that stop with that because I'm like, that's not what I expected to hear, right? These are the most fit people, right, Lynda, you've ever seen in your entire life. And I said, okay, tell me more. And he goes, no, we're inherently lazy. We look to get up and down the mountain with the least amount of energy, right? So that they have the largest energy reserve in the event that something happens, like an emergency or something else like that, you know? And so I think that's I think that's a funny part about neuroscience that not many people think about, which is it in some ways, as humans, we're really lazy. And that lazy is really efficient, right? Is it efficiency? Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredibly efficient. There are all sorts of systems in the brain that you wonder how on earth we actually survive, but we do extremely well. Yeah, it is. But the thing is, I think one of the greatest keys,
Mhm.
if I look at small children a lot, not just because of my grandbabies, but because I think I learn from 2-year-olds. Okay, all the time I'm learning from 2-year-olds. And if you look at a 2-year-old, they are just so curious. And that is the way a child learns.
Yeah.
And then we unlearn curiosity And then, therefore, the not knowing is a scary place. But the not knowing for children is not scary. It's not an uncertain place to them. It's like, oh my goodness, what can I learn now? This is so cool. This is like, oh, did you know this, and this? Oh, whoa, whoa. It's that is what we would serve ourselves well if we kept.
Mm,
And if we have lost it, bring it back again. It's that curiosity of a child, which means that uncertainty is not a problem. As long as we feel safe in our environment,
yeah.
it's not a problem. So when we're at work, there's a new system coming in, there are new different computers happening, AI is doing something that we have no idea what it's going to be doing. All of that is massive uncertainty. If we are honestly curious about it, it will lessen anxiety hugely and we can work better with it. So I actually think curiosity is a key to uncertainty.
Well, so let's talk about the future then. You talked about your grandbabies and you're trying to think about what world they're going to be in. What predictions do you have for them when they become around where we are? What are some things that you would like to hopefully see by that time?
What I'd like to see is us tackling climate change globally. And I would like to see that we grow up enough so that we're not trying to kill each other. I'd like to see all of those things that, of course, most of us want to see. However, I think I can't imagine what the world is going to be like when babies are born now. And I think other babies that are born, they're beta babies, aren't they? Alpha was the generation last year and before. We've just slipped into beta now, beta generation. And I can't imagine what babies being born now are going to be facing when they're 20, 25, 30 years old. Because my imagination can only work on what has gone before. And with AI, I don't know. I actually don't know, but I do know I can't stop it. And I do know that that's the way we're going to live. I also think, as you intimated earlier on in our conversation,
Mhm.
I also think that we are going to be more human in
Mhm.
our interactions as well. Like you said about the CEO who's been faked, who's been identity stolen or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, so I think we are going to, the only way we're going to know if we're actually talking to somebody who's really them is actually being with them
Mhm.
at the moment. Having said that, I don't believe virtual working is going anywhere, and I don't believe virtual meetings are going anywhere. And virtual learning, I think, is here to stay. Um, but yeah, it's a very tough question. I'm not a futurist. I can only go from what's happened, really. Crystal ball. There you go. I'll get my crystal ball out.
Well, genius. All right. Well, we've come to this part of the interview, Linda, that I've called the speed round. So while we've been talking, I have generated 8 questions for you, right? So in the speed round, you have to try and answer them as quickly as possible. Are you ready, Dr. Linda, for the speed round?
Scary. Okay.
Remember, it's just change. Okay, first question. Your favorite professor?
My favorite professor, that will be Oliver Sacks.
Oh, where was that?
Professor Oliver Sacks. Sadly, he died a couple of years ago now, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. But he's written this book that I absolutely adore called Musicophilia. He's a neuroscientist, and his book is based on all of his case studies. He was an applied neuroscientist, and he talks about how music unlocks the brain.
Oh,
And oh my goodness me, it is a superb book. We don't quite understand why music is so important to the human brain, but it is.
it is.
As yeah, but as you may know, people with advanced Alzheimer's disease, if you can unlock lyrics of a song by playing the tune, and otherwise they have no memory of anything. So it is amazing. So Oliver Sacks, and he writes so beautifully. It's
Hmm.
not esoteric, it's too sciencey and it's not too anything. It's just beautifully written book, Musicophilia by Professor Oliver Sacks.
Wow, genius. Okay, your best coping mechanism for uncertainty.
Fun. I have to inject fun somehow or other in what I love to do so that I can get it all in perspective. Not taking myself too seriously enables me to handle things. I talked about some very, very serious topics to people,
Mhm.
but I don't take myself seriously. So that is how I cope with it.
Well, there we go. There's a good balance between there. Okay. Uh, you said you help people unlock genius idea. What's the best genius idea you've heard?
Oh, there's so many. Okay, best genius idea I've heard of the simple ones. It's the simple ideas that, when needs must, the mother invention and all of that is so do you have the safety pin?
Yes.
Yes, a safety pin. It's genius. That's a genius idea. And it's the simple things that we have been using for such a long time that we don't even think about being a genius idea. But yeah, I think the simple things.
Genius in the simple. Okay. Best hidden potential that you have helped unlocked.
Hidden potential that, but actually, it's always communication.
Ooh.
Let's face it, everything's based on communication, right? So, wars are start because of bad communication and they end because of better communication. So, for me, the hidden potential I've got with somebody is if, for instance, they are having to talk about an idea they have or something like that, and I enable them to not only speak about it, but also give a presentation on it and they actually turn out to be really good presenters and they didn't know it. That's
Mm.
really good fun.
Yeah, genius. Let's see. All right, let's see. The best application of neuroscience.
Best application of neuroscience. Oh gosh, that is absolutely massive. The most, for many years, the most well researched part of the brain was the occipital lobe for vision.
Hmm.
And I think that has been fantastic because we understand an awful lot more about how we can cross the road safely by determining just by looking at a car how fast it's going. We can do those amazing things. And in terms of neuroscience and how it can help, oh, understanding the brain enables so much. It enables us to understand dementia better. It enables us to understand depression better. It enables us to understand mental health issues. It enables us to understand different personality issues. I think in the umbrella of that, it enables us to actually be able to embrace others better and include others better that are different from us.
Genius. Okay. Your favorite thing to do when there's nothing to do.
Go for a walk. I love walking. I love speed walking in the hills. I live in a very hilly part of England, and to go for a day's walking up in the Chiltern Hills where I live, and then going for a pub lunch by a roaring fire with a glass of red wine and a beautiful lunch is good. It's a really
Mm.
nice thing to do.
That's a favorite thing to do. That's very nice. Okay, your favorite sustainable clothing.
Favorite sustainable clothing. Uh, my sustainable clothing I'm proud of is that when the person who made it is paid properly.
Oh,
Yeah, so I don't want clothes that are made by people who are earning less than 50p a week or something in my earning nothing. I don't want that. I don't want their agony. Although having said that, of course, if those people didn't have that, then what else would they have? But I prefer to buy my clothes to people who have actually bought it properly. So the sustainability comes from a sustainable business that has created it and everybody's paid fairly.
well, genius. Side sloth fact, right? There's a lot of Latin American tourist things that to have you take pictures with sloths, but we learned from the sloth expert that the sloth is a very likely to be overstimulated, and unfortunately, many of those who take selfies with sloth, the sloth actually dies at the end of the day. So they have started a no selfie campaign with sloths so that they can actually thrive. So that's something that we learned and we're following too. So things that you weren't expecting. Okay, the last question here: the best hope for your grandbabies. best hope for your grandbabies?
That they live a long, healthy, happy lives and they use their lives to the best of their ability.
Oh, genius answer to a question. Uh, Dr. Lynda, it's been great talking with you. Last question is, if you could magically get somebody to remember one thing from this conversation, what would you want that one thing to be?
Lighten up. You know what? The stuff that we worry about, the majority of it really doesn't matter. And if it does matter, we can't control it. We've got a very small part of our lives that we can control and that really matter. The rest of it, let it go. Be like, no.
Let it go, lighten up. It sounds like a Disney song that I bet your grandbabies are going to love. And Dr. Shaw, I look forward. Thank you so much for your time today. And I look forward to seeing you in Halifax, where we're going to join each other again for the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers Convention. Until then, period.
I look forward to it, John, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. We've been talking with Dr. Lynda Shaw from the UK, right? One of the past presidents for the Speaking Association there. And she just says, hey, people, lighten up, would you? Think about what you can do today to have fun, enjoy yourself, make a difference, and take a look at the neuroscience that you have and see if you can make yourself more comfortable with uncertainty and change. Speaking of uncertainty and change, if you are on social media now and watching us, well, we hope you've been enjoying this positive program here. Make sure and hit subscribe, share, like, or comment. If you want to see all the episodes for this podcast, go to engagingvirtualmeetings.online or subscribe in 13 of your favorite podcast platforms. Did you know that the number one platform for this podcast is Apple Podcasts, followed closely by Spotify. If you want to see more of this, you want to learn the art and science of engagement, come to the Engaging Conference. You'll invest 3 days about learning. And Dr. Shaw, it can be online. We're doing this hybrid. We are both in person and virtual because Dr. Shaw said virtual learning is not dead. So click the link and get a ticket. And if you want to be like Dr. Lynda, do us a favor. Go to engagingvirtualmeetings.com/meet, select interview, and you could be the next person here on the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast. Again, I hope you hear that last message today. Hey, lighten up. We'll see you next time.